It does to me, it might seem that this is an incredible amount of stuff for 18 months, because Strategic Profit started only 18 months ago, right? I released the Internet Business Manifesto about 18 months ago. That's it, my first document. And in 18 months, like, the company's grown, my positioning has increased, and it's all because of this fundamental that change is happening at an accelerated rate. So what I want to do is I want to go through each of the documents and major pieces that I've put out into the marketplace and tell you, one, the big idea of each one, like why I wrote it and what I hoped people got out of it when I created it. And I thought that would be useful because it would be like a quick recap of some of the most important ideas I felt that I needed to share. But after I go through that, then we're going to go through it again. And we're going to go through it again so that I can explain to you what was the template, the boilerplate model, so that if you want to create a document, a video, or what have you, you can do the same. You know, just pick and choose which thrust you want. And then we'll move into some other stuff. All right, so for those of you who don't know the story, you know, I was doing internet marketing and I was doing okay. You know, I had some projects I did well, but I was working harder than I had ever worked before, and I was making less than I had ever made before. And that's all relative, right? So it occurred to me one night, like while I was writing in my journal, like let me see what the real problem is. And so I was bitching and moaning in my journal and writing out, like, why am I working harder than ever and making less than ever? And that's where I came up with that whole U diagram. By basically, I was a member of the market, I was struggling, and I was trying to figure out why was I struggling. And by doing so, I came up with this chart that really, probably of all the graphics I've ever had and created and used, was probably was the most important in the help of growing my company. So, the Internet Business Manifesto. Now you got to remember, this was only 18 months ago. And 18 months ago, I released this document, and my main thrust was, in order to be successful, online or offline, you had to shift from being an opportunity seeker to being an entrepreneur, right? And what's fulfilling, rewarding, et cetera, is that the people that heeded that message have gone on to greatness. You know, there's quite a few of the speakers here who, when that report came out, were, you know, independents. They were working by themselves in their own house. And now they have staffs of 20 or 30 or 40. And so to compete with them today would be much more difficult than competing with them then. And my second thrust of the manifesto is that you still have time to build a business, but you better move quick. All right. Then I came out with the Internet Business Manifesto, the missing chapter. And the big idea there was that your business must be centered around your strengths. That you need to, it's not enough to be passionate about something. And the example I gave was I had this client, Giancarlo, and Giancarlo is a top-ranked tennis player. And I love tennis. I grew up playing tennis. I started playing tennis when I was 4, and I was actually ranked when I was a kid. But 40 pounds overweight, I haven't picked up a tennis racket in 10 years, and no matter how passionate I am about tennis, I'm not going to beat Giancarlo. Right? My passion is only going to get me so far. I have to have a strength. I have to be good at it. And so you need to have a business that you're good at, or you need to have some positioning in your market that allows you to express your strength, or you're fighting an uphill battle all the way through. So the concept of this report was build a business around your strengths. The next one, the final chapter, was exposing the business models of the most successful in our market. Business models that most people would never have a chance to see, but I had a chance to see because I consulted and worked with the different companies. And so it was my intention to bring it to everyone else so that everyone could see it, could model it, follow it. And I think that if you haven't read this report, of all the reports I've written, this is probably has the best information in it. It's also, though, because of the way it's structured, and if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about that later, the way it's structured, it didn't resonate as well because it had too many ideas as opposed to one fundamental theme. And when you write, if you have too many ideas, it becomes somewhat harder for the reader to grasp as opposed to just like one idea and just keep backing it up with examples, examples, examples. I learned from this one, and I never did that again. But I still think to this day that the information in there is, most people are still missing, and this would expose why. All right. Then I did a series of videos. Everyone was saying that videos were the next big thing, and so I said, okay, well, let me do some videos instead of reports. And so I did this series of videos. The first one was Startup to Freedom. And it showed 11 steps on how to go from nothing, no business, no nothing, to being free. Now, this is interesting because I laid it out, and I didn't really appreciate the difference that was really going on in the marketplace. Although I was hip to it, I just didn't realize how important of an issue it was. You would think, or I would think, that when you get involved in business, your goal is to build a business that can be the most profitable, the biggest, the most successful, et cetera. But I think that was the case. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that nowadays, entrepreneurs don't necessarily dream about making the maximum amount of money. What they dream about is making a lot of money, but also having a lot of freedom. And I think there's no better example of that than Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, right? Because that book was like a phenomenon, right? And why? Because it tapped into a core desire of a lot of people who wanted to work less and have more freedom. It wasn't promising you that you'd make $1 million. It was promising you that you could work 4 hours a week and have free time, enjoy life. And the more you tap into that core desire in any piece that you produce, the more success you will have. So, going in reverse for a second, back to the Internet Business Manifesto. That manifesto has been knocked off, I don't even know how many times. 10 or 15 different times that I've seen, like where they've just done cut and replace. And they didn't even replace all of them. So every once in a while it would say like internet marketer when it was supposed to say real estate agent or stock trader. And in each time it was successful, right? Now, it was successful because the main message of the manifesto was dealing with frustration, people feeling like they do too much, not getting the results, overworked, and that feeling is pervasive in every industry, in every market. And so my belief is that more so than any other reason, that's why the manifesto took off as much as it did, because it resonated with that core frustration, that core desire. And Tim Ferriss's book just took that about 100 times further, right? Even with the title. And he split test titles. I don't know if you know that, with AdWords. So that title had inside of it this promise of relieving this core problem, right? And I used a graphic instead to kind of say, to have that core problem exposed, and then also to say I have an answer. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So then I did another video called the Momentum series, and that was, I focused on the 4 steps that you need to really get your business off the ground. Because it's so easy these days to get unfocused, to think that there's 50 things you have to do, when in reality, there's only 3. So this series of videos was about your beliefs about an entrepreneur. Are they accurate or are they inaccurate? Your market, picking the right market for you, figuring out the right offer. What are you offering them? And in case you haven't heard me talk about it before, in our market, because copy is one of the distinguishing elements, copy gets a lot of respect and also gets a lot of focus. But in direct response, in general, it goes, list is the most important, offer is the second most important, and way down on the bottom is copy. Now, copy is a variable that's the easiest to change, so that's why it gets so much focus. But your offer, the offer that you make to the marketplace, has tremendous more impact than your copy. You could have a great offer, horrible copy, and you will sell really well. If you have a horrible offer and great copy, you will not. So the offer, right? So who you are as an entrepreneur, the marketplace you choose, the offer that you crystallize, and the marketing that you do to get that offer out. That was what the Momentum series was all about. Then I did another video called Profit Prescriptions, and it was my response to asking the people who were reading my blog at the time, what holds you back? And all the reasons they gave me were basically false beliefs. And so what I did was I responded to each and every one of them with a prescription on how to change it, right? And that really the takeaway there is that the only thing that stands in your way are the excuses that you've already sold yourself. Then shift back to reports. I like reports better in general because I think that I just don't like watching video for an hour in front of my computer. There's about 100 other places I'd rather be and 100 other things I'd like to do, and I'm at the mercy of the person who's got the video and their speed as opposed to my speed. So I like reports, and I guess that's why my preference is reports. But I came out with the attention age doctrine because what I saw was that attention was becoming a scarcer and scarcer commodity. And it is gotten 100 times worse even since this report has come out. There are so many people who emailed us yesterday, the day before yesterday, who said, I didn't even know this event was existing. I didn't even know it was happening. And, we did our best to get the word out, and obviously we did a good job of that. But nonetheless, because attention is so scarce, you can't get through to everybody. So this was really talking about attention scarcity. Ours, right? Mine, yours, and the marketplace. And how do you deal with that? Then the next one, the doctrine 2. It was, how do you win in a marketplace that is attention scarce? Because I didn't have the answer back then. I thought I did, but it wasn't really fully complete. So it took me another 4 months or something to write this, and what I believe now is that the only way you win in marketing today is to be where the attention already is as opposed to trying to get attention yourself. And so if social media is getting attention, if people are giving their attention to other people, then you have to figure out how to broadcast through people. If people are giving their attention to experts, then you have to position yourself as an expert. I think the days are gone where you can just scream loud enough, interrupt often enough, and get people's attention. I think they block you out. And so the attention age doctrine 2 was about that, figuring out where in your marketplace people are putting their attention and moving your business in that direction. And if your business is online, then it's experts and social media. And then this is a report I just came out with, the Mavin Matrix Manifesto. And it had 11 steps in it of how to position yourself. When I worked on these concepts that are spoken about in this report, it gave me a completely new perspective on a lot of stuff that I had seen before. How many people saw, like on YouTube or wherever, Steve Jobs' commencement address at Stanford? Just raise your hand. Okay, quite a few. I'd say about 40%. It's an amazing speech, and it's very uplifting, and it went very viral. If you go to YouTube, I think it's been watched about 1.5 million times. I mean, it's a great presentation. I watched it again recently after I wrote this report. And it's still a great presentation, speech, etc. But what's really interesting is that it follows the principles that I was talking about in this report. He starts out by saying, I'm going to share with you 3 stories from my own life. And that's exactly what he did. There is a reason why we know that Bill Gates bought the operating system that created Microsoft. There's a reason why we know that Google was started, in the dorm rooms of Stanford. We know that Oprah Winfrey was a struggling journalist in Chicago, or that Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, created the first pair with a waffle iron. We know these, even though we're not consciously aware that we know these, because the person that we're talking about said it as often as they could whenever they had the chance to say it. And because of that, we know it. And the way memory works by association, by linking stuff. If you have just a random piece of information, it's very hard for that piece of information to get into long-term memory. But if you have something in the mind, then you can build out pretty easily anything that can link towards it. So the creation story, that's what we called that in the Mavin Matrix Manifesto, is an important component of 11 components that we highlighted to help you get inside the mind. And there were other ones like predictable behaviors. The essence, though, is that what you're trying to do is seem familiar and friendly to your marketplace. Because we notice what our friends do and what is familiar to us. I talk about this concept too, and I think it's a really important one, so let me stress this one too. There's a component of the brain called the reticular activating system, and the reticular activating system is the part of the brain that helps you filter everything that's coming in at you. So if you've ever had the experience of thinking about a new car and then all of a sudden seeing that new car everywhere, or you're trying to have a baby and get pregnant and seeing pregnant women all over the place, that's the reticular activating system. You have millions of pieces of information coming at you at all times, and this part of your brain is deciding what should come in and be noticed and what shouldn't. That's its function. And I give this example in the report as well about how if you've ever been at a party, engaged in a conversation, deeply engaged in a conversation, so that all the other conversations just kind of turn into a mumble. But one of those conversations, someone mentions your name, all of a sudden it gets your attention. Now, how could it happen? You had to hear what they were saying before that to hear your name as well. But the part of your brain that's processing all that is not important. It doesn't find any of that other stuff important, but your name is always important. So it automatically then moves your attention. That's important because ultimately what you want is for your marketplace's reticular activating system to know you. Right? So when an email comes in, it gets noticed. When an offer is made, it gets noticed. And so this report was all about how to do that. Right? How to get into the reticular activating system. What are the common features that I found that anyone who has. And I think that that's really, in a world that's become very attention deficit or attention scarce, that's incredibly important. That's a lot of stuff for 18 months. I've been a busy guy. And it seems like some of those are so long ago, and yet they're not. It's only a year and a half ago. And I hope that, one, the takeaways, are something that you can latch onto, but also that to use it as a proof point of looking at how much things change. I mean, I think we take it for granted now, like some of the concepts in the manifesto or the first doctrine. These are all we take it for granted, but yet this has all happened in 18 months. The best-selling business books of the early 80s didn't mention all the terms that are used today. I mean, it's phenomenal, the rate of change. So there's this tremendous rate of change. And we have too many options now, right? There are so many options, and your marketplace has so many options because competition has become global, even for local people because of the internet. So to understand the position that your marketplace is in, your prospect, your consumers, your clients, you have to understand that that's their viewpoint of the market. If you've tried to buy a new phone or a new camera or whatever, you experience that. You experience this holy crap. Like, there's so many options. How do I choose the right one? But that's another crack in the door being open for you to step in, right? When people have so many options in front of them and they're not sure where to go, somebody who steps up and says, I understand and resonates with you, expresses your problems as good or better than you have, so you feel comfortable that they know where you're at, and then points to a solution, you feel pretty comfortable about taking that solution. You know, saying that you should open this door, not that door. And being the person in your marketplace that gives people the answer of, like, this is where you want to go and I'm going to help you get there. And that really should be the thrust of, I think, every business. It doesn't matter if you're selling lights or information or cars or whatever. It's, I understand where you're at and I'm going to help you get to the dead center. I'm going to help you get to the right place for you. Right? To take that one door and really show them the path. And hopefully that path is with you. And if you do that correctly, I think you'll experience tremendous loyalty, tremendous growth in your business, and also fulfillment. Incredible fulfillment. All right, so now let's go through it again, but let's just look at what I was doing so that you can take it and try and have something that has the same impact in your market. So I think the Internet Business Manifesto was really exposing the fundamental problem that everyone in the market experiences. So if you can figure out what the fundamental problem is and express it better than it's been expressed, that'll make that work. You know, quite a few people told me that it didn't really tell them very much that was new, but it kind of connected the dots, right? People knew that they had the experience of buying stuff and not finishing it. People knew that they were sometimes impulsive in their purchases and that they maybe lacked some strategic direction. But by creating this categorization of opportunity seeker versus strategic entrepreneur, it put all of that into perspective. So can you do that? Can you take a major problem of your marketplace and give it new perspective by articulating it better than maybe it's been articulated in the past? Now, what I'll also tell you is that I try and go through a process with everything that I do, every report I've ever created, every video that I've ever done, of what I call preemptive problem solutions, right, or problem creation. And the way I do that, and what I recommend to you if you try and take this approach, is to list out all the problems that you have identified in the marketplace. 1, 2, 3, you know. And then look at them and ask yourself, how could these all be symptoms of a bigger problem? How could all these problems actually be symptoms of something deeper, bigger, more fundamental, more powerful? And when you come up with that, right, if you can come up with that one problem that turns all the other problems into symptoms, what you've done is, 1, you've distinguished yourself, right? 2, you've made everyone else and their solution a Band-Aid or a patch, and you've created something that'll resonate deeply with people. So in this case, in the manifesto, it was, you know, strategic entrepreneur versus opportunity seeker. I gave an example at the last seminar of, like, information overload. Information overload, like people experiencing too much information coming at them, they're cluttered with stuff all over their desk, etc. Like, if you give people the solutions that are typical, and they're typical because they work, like, you know, only touch paper once, create a filing system, all that kind of stuff, it just kind of goes over people's heads. They've heard it before. So it's nothing new, it's nothing unique. You're not distinguishing yourself as different. But if you look at all the problems of information overload and you list them, and then you say, wow, you know, what it looks like to me is, I I've never really thought about this enough to know whether I really believe this or not, but here's the concept. It looks like to me that, but I do believe there's a twinge of truth in it at least. It looks like to me that information overload all stems from self-esteem about the information that you produce and always valuing other people's information more than your own. And so that drive to consistently go out and get more information, more information, more information is internal because you believe that other people's information is better than what you can create yourself. Now, I don't know whether that's true, but let's say it was, and that's what you said, and you were in the business of like time management and you know, information organization and stuff like that. You've immediately categorized everyone else as a Band-Aid because unless you fix this core problem, you're always going to experience all those other things, no matter what other Band-Aid approach you use. And so that's the approach I take when I write a document or create a video. I look at all the problems and I say, is there a problem that would turn all of these into symptoms? And the reason I do that, it wasn't this, you know, evil marketing mind that came up with it. It was the fact that when I studied hypnosis and NLP, you know, which I did with the top experts in the world, you know, Richard Bandler and all those types, one of the first things they taught you when working with people was that their problem is never their problem. Like, if they really knew their problem, they'd already have the solution. There's a deeper problem going on. And so I just applied that concept to marketing. Right? Let's look at all the problems. Let's find the deeper problem so that I can position myself as very relevant and in the process preempt everyone else. Okay. So the missing chapter was expose a big mistake that most people make when starting, right? So can you do something like that? Now, I came up with this report. I wrote this one. This was actually the fastest report I ever wrote. I wrote it in a week. And I wrote it because I had a conversation with John Reese. And John Reese told me, you know, he called me and said, oh, man, I loved the manifesto. It was great. I really love what you did. And I said, thanks, man. And he said, but, you know, I think you got a problem. And I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, well, I think that people who are reading it are going to think that they have to have a business already. And if they don't have a business, which is the majority of the market, you're not going to be able to, you know, sell them. You're not going to be able to resonate with them. You're not going to be able to sell what it is that you offer. And so I said, wow, I never thought of that. And that, you know, the conversation went on, and that was it. And then after I got off the phone with him, I went through the manifesto, and I looked at it, and I said, wow, you know, he's right. That could certainly be the case. So I felt the need that I had to address another part of the market, right? All the people who were just starting. So I asked at the end of the first manifesto, what would hold you back? What would prevent you from being successful now that you know this information? And I'll take a tangent for a second. That's incredibly important. Engagement, right? When someone goes to my blog and types in anything, like, the level of the relationship has just increased dramatically. There's active learning and there's passive learning, and passive learning is like when you read or watch. Active learning is when you do, and active learning has a much higher chance of getting into the brain. And if you're trying to become familiar with the reticular activating system, someone's engagement is incredibly important because it gets you through to the brain a lot faster, a lot more certain. So I looked at all those reasons that people gave me for the manifesto, why they still couldn't be successful. And I tried to find the deeper problem, right, the one issue. And what I felt after looking at all those problems, and I think there were about 500 of them, was this answer, that most people were starting businesses that were not built around a core strength. So when they asked people, like, hey, can you do the graphics and I'll cut you in for a piece of my business, my entire business, and the people said no, it was because those people didn't have any belief that that person was going to be successful because it wasn't built around one of their strengths, right? So that was this report. So the report had really two different things. One was expose a big mistake that everyone in your market is making at the outset, right, in the beginning. The other is that deeper psychological thing, right, coming up with that deeper problem. So can you do that in your marketplace? And I think you can do these in any market. You know, for some reason, the lighting market keeps coming up, maybe because the lights in my room are kind of screwy. Somebody changed all the plugs so that the switches don't work. But you know, when most people light their house, they don't really give thought to the dimensions of the room, like the best way for the room to look, etc. I don't really know anything about lighting, but you could have some very valuable information about it. You know, when I lived in Manhattan, you know, I had this big loft. It was this big, huge open space, and the architect, when we were going to remodel, talked about bringing in a lighting engineer because the right lighting can make a place look phenomenal. And that was the first time I was ever exposed to that. I was like, wow. And then I started looking at it, and I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, you know, you could be in the lighting market and talk about the mistakes people make. It doesn't matter what market you're in. You can do this. All right. The next one was just teaching the models of the people that are the most successful in the market. Can the people that are not the most successful learn from the most successful, and can you translate that information to them? I mean, that's a pretty straightforward one. You know, if we're going to continue with the lighting example, here's how the best lit places do it. Here's how they position their lighting. Here's the type of bulbs they use. They don't use fluorescent. They use halogen. They don't use iridescent. They use this. So taking what was most successful and helping others apply it themselves. The Startup to Freedom videos. Showing, in hindsight, I would say that this was it. At the time, I was just trying to give people an overview of a process that they could go through from starting in the market or being in the market to getting to their final goal. In hindsight, what I would say is that if you can show awareness to a new concern, goal, issue for the marketplace, you have immediate resonance with everyone in the marketplace. This is kind of like the Tim Ferriss kind of thing, right? See, I didn't say start up to make $1 million or start up to an empire. It was start up to freedom. But I wasn't as hip to what the real core issue was as Tim was. You know, I was just a member of the market knowing that I wanted freedom, and therefore that's what I talked about, but he took it 10 steps further because he really realized this is the core issue. People are too overworked, overtaxed, not feeling like they have enough time with their families, and this one title can kind of summarize it all. So showing awareness of new goals is, I think, incredibly powerful. The next one, the Momentum series, is every market has people who are actively engaged and people sitting on the sidelines. Can you give people who are sitting on the sidelines an easy way, a very direct, clear path on how to get started? That also resonates with a large segment because most people do sit on the sidelines. Most people do not take action, right? Most people think about changing the lighting for years before they actually make the purchase decision. So if you can meet them where they are and show them the easy path of getting started, you will have something that resonates. The profit prescriptions, once again, this was through engagement. People told me what their problems were, but once again, this, I think, is a great formula, a model. If you can surface each issue, problem that's going on in people's heads, and then meet it head on. Here's why that's false. Here's why that's incorrect. Here's why you're mistaken. So it's exposing the wrong beliefs, right, that are commonplace and giving them a way to fix it. And just to reiterate, the reason I'm going through these is that you can use these as blueprints. Like if you're scratching your head wondering, what would I write about? What would I create a video about that would really resonate with my marketplace? These are the templates. These are the models that you can follow. The attention age doctrine is about highlighting a new trend. Every market has new trends. You know, it just depends on how big of a deal you make it. And you know, I want to take some of the mystique out of it too. This is not a new problem. People were taught, the quote of Herbert Simon, who's a Nobel Prize winner, who talked about as information increases, there'll be further like a scarcity of attention. He said it much more eloquently than that. But He said that in 1971, the year I was born. So this is not a new phenomenon, it's not a new concept, right? If you look up attention economy, you'll see a lot written about the attention economy. But I changed it. I changed it to the attention age as opposed to the attention economy, and I put my own spin on it. And I did that so I could own the word. You know, if you type attention age in Google with quotes, I think there's close to 100,000 references, and they're all, for the most part, I'd say about 80% of them, 90% of them point back to me. That's what you want. So when you expose a new trend, and it doesn't have to be a new trend, is what I'm saying. It could be a new trend to you, right? It just needs to be a new trend to you, something that you're like, wow, this is a big deal. And by exposing it, sharing it, you can have a report like this, or a video like that. Now, once you expose that trend, obviously, there's a place to follow up, which is show them how to win. Show them how to get the results they still want. Like now that that trend is going on. Show them how to capitalize on that trend. The reason I wanted to do this, and I hope this also is clear, is that, you know, we've grown and we'll probably break 8 figures this year, and we've done no SEO. We've done no pay-per-click. We've done really nothing except what I'm showing you. My whole company was built on these free reports and free videos. Everything. My whole reputation, like the people that I partner with today, all came about because of what I'm showing you. So if you're thinking, well, I don't really want to create a report or free content or stuff like that, my thought would be you should really reconsider. Because I can't think of a more effective way. You know, I don't think Frank Kern's in the room right now, but he was here a few minutes ago. I saw his blonde wig. I did a call with him, and I think he articulated like a core concept better than I've ever heard it articulated before about information like this. And so I want to share it with you. And hopefully if he talks about it, I will have stolen his thunder. He talked about how you could pretty much take a person where they are on the left-hand side of your page, and on the right-hand side of the page, their goal, right? Starting out, I want to make a lot of money online. Other side, I've made a lot of money online. And you could put a timeline in between those 2 points. And you could put hash marks for achievement. And what he said is that your material should really give people results in advance, right? There's a series of steps that someone has to take to get to that final goal of going from, I want to make money online, to I have made money online. And if you can start moving people in that right direction, you know, maybe the first thing is to create a website, or create an offer, or start building a list, or whatever. If you can help them accomplish step 1, you've just moved them closer to their goal. Now, I think that's profound. And I'll tell you why I think it's profound. I think it's profound because, one, I think your intensity and desire to accomplish a goal increases as you get closer to it, right? I gained 70 pounds working on the internet, and I've recently lost about 35. And I can tell you now that my will is like steel, right? Because I've already lost 35 pounds. There's a lot of clothes I can't fit into, but I can fit into some of my clothes, and I'm a lot more determined now than when I was 35 pounds ago, right? As you get closer to your goal, your desire increases. So by providing someone free content that moves them closer to their goal, you've just helped them increase the desire to accomplish it. The other thing is that if you think about different levels of proof or different levels of persuasion, you know, the way I like to look at it is that you have obnoxious selling, which would be your standard website, big, you know, headline, stuff like that, screaming and yelling, which will work 1%, 2%, 3% of the time. That's why people do it. Above that would be persuasion, right? And that would be like product launch formula, using all the tactics of persuasion to get people to buy. And it's 10 times more effective than a obnoxious selling website. Then I think above that is influence. And it's a horrible example, but it's the first one that comes to mind. Hitler was able to get people to do things that I don't think he could have ever gotten them to do by just persuading them. He used influence because the peer group, everybody was doing it. And when the peer group's doing it, you can get people to take more action, even that's counter to their own thoughts, than you can by just mere persuasion. So influence trumps persuasion. And then I think what trumps all of them is your own proof, your own results. And so by giving someone results in advance, like Kern was talking about, you've given them the highest level of proof possible. And there is no doubting it. They have a personal experience with you now. So that was a tangent, but I think an important one as you look at everything that you provide the marketplace. Now, some of these reports don't do that, obviously, because when you're exposing a new trend, you're not necessarily moving people forward. So what I would say then is that you then default to the other thing I was saying, take a look at all the problems and try and recategorize all those problems as symptoms of this new trend, this new issue. And then the last report is reestablishing a new goal, right? It's not that you really want this, because if you want all those things, you really need to do this. You need to be this. Right? The new goal that they should aspire to. Now, let me also say that these are all looking at these in hindsight. I generate a lot of ideas, and I get very passionate about those ideas, and so I didn't create these all with that boilerplate template. What I will tell you, though, is this. And we'll get everyone a copy of it, so somebody mark that down. I have a mind map. I have a mind map that I created of the Internet Business Manifesto, and I created this mind map after the fact, way after the fact. And the reason I did it is that when I wrote the manifesto, Jay Abraham called me and said, wow, that was an incredible document that you wrote. Michael Masterson said the same, Gary Bencivenga said the same, John Carlton said the same, Clayton Makepeace. Every single top copywriter that's ever lived that I know called me and just said what an incredible document it was and how persuasive it was and all that. And I didn't write it from that standpoint. I wrote it from the standpoint that I had been teaching it and speaking on the platform and selling it from the platform, so it had been tweaked to sell, but I didn't even consider that when I was writing it, and I just wrote it like my presentation speech. And after the fact, after all these great people told me what a great document I created, and I had no idea why, I went back through it to figure out what was it that they saw that I didn't even realize I was doing. And we'll get everybody the mind map, but the big thing is, what I was doing is that I had one big idea, and then every single subhead supported that big idea or backed it up. I think if you did the same, it would be actually better for you to do it yourself so you could see it, as opposed to just taking my notes on it, although we'll give you my notes. I think you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, if you wanted to take your education further, I would suggest that you read the doctrine too, because there's a lot of tweaks that I've made to the way I do reports in doctrine too, like what we've just covered, what's coming next, all these elements to get the people to keep reading, right? And if you look on the blog, there are even some people that said, I knew everything that was in this report, but yet I couldn't stop reading it. And it's those elements that really come into play. I was talking to Clayton Makepeace about that, and he made a great distinction I never knew, and that's why they're in there, about what we've covered so far. I thought you put what we've covered so far in so that you didn't lose people. But in fact, it's not for that reason. It's for people who are skimming, and all of a sudden they say, oh wow, that was covered? And then they go back to the beginning and start reading. And that's the reason. So there's a lot of elements. If you look at the doctrine too, all the elements that are in there for a reason. It wasn't just fanciful. It took me longer to write that one than a lot of other ones, and it's because I made some tweaks to the presentation style that I think were very effective. And it was the most effective report I've written to date, in downloads, in comments, etc. So it trumped the manifesto in its success. So one of the things that I want you to appreciate and understand, and not because it's me, but because it's the concept, is I'd like to consider myself, an internet marketing maven or a marketing maven, and look at all the value of all those reports, all those videos that I've created for free for the marketplace. And it's no big mystery, to me at least, why my company's grown so fast, why I've gotten to the position I've gotten to so fast, because look at all the value I created, right? For free. And it just made people want to know more, be more engaged. And I think you could do the same. And so, the background is MVP, most valuable player. I think you can aspire to be the most valuable player of your marketplace. And I think if you did that, the results come along with it. It's almost like everything comes full circle. And it's like going back to how business was done hundreds of years ago, where the people that provided the most value were the people that actually got the most business. And there was this whole dark ages where you could, trick people, you could convince people you were something that you weren't, but I think that's all gone now. And so we're back to this stage, so you have to prove it.